Now, when I asked Glyn for a bio for today's session, she sent me about 3 lines. And because I actually had a bit of background information about her, I said to her, I think you need to send me slightly extended because Glyn has actually done some really important things in her life. She's a campaigner and advocate for women's and children's rights, especially in the areas of family and domestic violence, child sexual abuse, elder abuse and homelessness. Her work stretches far and wide as an activist to fight for justice and human rights for all people and animals. Glyn made legal history in 2012 when she took her perpetrator all the way to the High Court of Australia and changed the law in a landmark case both nationally and internationally. Her courage has paved the way for women in Australia and all Commonwealth countries. In 2015, Glyn was nominated for Australian of the Year, and in 2017 she was nominated again and became a finalist as South Australian of the Year. At a public ceremony in 2016, Glyn was presented with the Mayoral Award for Outstanding Service to the Community of the Mount Barker districts. Glyn's passion drives her to make a difference in the lives of others, and it is what she does best. That passion culminated in 2015 with the birth of Love, Hope and Gratitude Foundation Incorporated. It's my very great pleasure to introduce Glyn Scott.
Thank you, Pam. Thank you, Pam, for asking me to come today. And hi, everyone, and thanks again for letting me be here. I guess if I start with just a little bit of background about me, my life began as an orphan, and I went through quite a bit of childhood sexual abuse, and then at the age of 14 became involved in a relationship that was forced on me, and I became pregnant and was forced to marry the man that got me pregnant. And throughout that marriage I had 3 children, and he was responsible for the deaths of my 2 eldest sons. And so for many years I wanted to do something to make sense of all of that, but it wasn't that easy when you got little kids and trying to, you know, make sure they're okay. And, you know, I was homeless for a time, and also, you know, fleeing domestic violence on a daily basis almost. And so it took a long, long time before I could finally get away. But I did marry a second time, and I married a beautiful man who loved and cared for me and my children. And he was the love of my life, and it was just a beautiful thing to have some peace and joy after the horrible stuff. But he died 15 years ago, and he made me promise when he was dying that I would tell my story, and also if I got the opportunity to bring my perpetrators to justice, that I would. And so began a series of things because of the Mulligan inquiry, which is where it all started. I ended up with 5 court cases, 4 of which went to the court, but for various reasons DPP would only go ahead with 2 of them, and so the Sunday school teacher that abused me for about 6.5 years on twice a week, we went to trial. That was not the outcome that I wanted, but and I wasn't the only one, there were 5 of us. But unfortunately the magistrate saw fit that because we didn't tell our mothers at the time, we must have made it all up. And so that was a pretty big blow. for me and the other girl that was in the court. The other three weren't able to face the court, so it was only the two of us, and it was pretty devastating. But at the same time, of course, I had the big one going on at the same time, which had already got to the Supreme Court at that stage, and so from that, it just continued. The third one was against the orphanage for the treatment and the abuse that I suffered in there. But unfortunately, they destroyed all the records, and so there was nothing left for DPP to find. We did everything. Ted Mulligan, he did so many searches for me during those years, before and after, but there was nothing for anyone to find, and so we couldn't go ahead with it, which is really disappointing. But anyway, they're getting found out with the things that they're doing, and when I see, constantly in the paper how, this one's been found and that one's been found, and I feel, it's happening. So for me, that's, important. But what's mostly important for me is the work that I do and that I've done since then, because the last probably 7 or 8 years now, probably 8 years now, I've been feeding homeless people. And that came about through one night, my friends took me for dinner on my birthday, and as we walked down to the car, the restaurant had packed some little packs of the food that was left over, and for me to take home. And we walked down the street, and there was a man in the doorway, an elderly man who, it was, of course, July, freezing cold. And I said to my friends, "Oh, look at that poor man. He was cold. He was trying to, put newspaper down on the floor, on the ground, and he had this threadbare blue tarpaulin, those plastic ones you get from Cheapers Chips. And his track pants were halfway up his legs, and he had on a pair of thongs and a hoodie that was too small for him. So he had the hood over his head, and that was very badly worn as well, but he couldn't put his arms in it because it was too small, and only a singlet underneath. And I said, if he's still there when we walk back, because we were going to have a coffee afterwards, and said, if he's still there, I'm going to give him that food. And they said, oh no, you can't go up and speak to him. And I said, why not? And so when we came back, he was there, and I went to the car and got the food, and I gave it to him. And he was such a lovely person, and thanked me, and said, he hadn't eaten for 3 days, and so the food was still warm because it was packed in foil packs, and they gave me a plastic knife and fork and a serviette. So it was really great that, I could give it to him. And so that would have been, probably 2 meals then and next morning. But that made me think. So when I was driving back home, I decided that I would go down again the next night and see if I could find him and take some warm clothes and a blanket for him, and so that's what I did, and that's what began me working with feeding homeless people in the city, and wherever I saw them, I would do that, and so I continued to do that. But what upset me the most was the children, the kids that would come, and you could see them across the park, and they would stand watching what I was doing but didn't want to come close to speak to me. And eventually one of the older people, the men that I had been feeding, must have spoken to the children, because one of them came across the road and stood, and I said, would you like something to eat? And there was no verbal contact for a bit, and then all of a sudden he sort of took a step forward, and I said, here, you can have it. And the guy that was standing next to me said, she's not going to tell the cops. And so it was really interesting because these kids some of them were as young as 8, and they all came eventually. After time, they got to know that I would always have a warm meal for them, and I provided jumpers and, some shoes and socks and scarves and beanies and things to keep them warm. And they'd sit and talk to me on the curb. I'd sit down on the curb with them, and they'd talk to me, and I ended up, counselling them. And this is something that I did every night for that nearly 8 years. It was. I've had to stop now coming to Adelaide every night because I'm just overrun with looking after my mums and kids and people up in the hills where I'm working, and so I've had to stop doing it every night, but I still come down at least twice a week and find the people down here that I've been in touch with for a long time. But there was like probably about 16 kids in the end that used to come of a night time, and they'd just sit and talk, and their stories were horrendous. The terrible abuse that they were going through at home, and if the police found them, they'd take them back home because they were underage, and then after a third time, they'd then take them to Families SA, and where they'd be put in residential care or wherever, and of course the abuse would go on there, and they'd run away and be brought back, and so then that's why they were on the street, because they didn't want to be found. And so their fear was that somebody would tell the police, because when the police find them, they take them somewhere. And I mean, obviously they're doing what they think is best, but these kids don't want to be, they just don't want to be abused anymore. So it breaks my heart when I think how serious that is, and how many, I was talking to Michael O'Connell, who is a really great friend, and he was telling me, his daughter works in this field as well, and he was telling me that there are over 2,000 children between the age of 8 and 18 who are homeless in the CBD of Adelaide. And that just, when you think about that, it is just mind-blowing, really. And so now, from that, I in 2015, I started my foundation, which I wanted to do something to honour my boys and make their lives, that they're not just gone. There's something in their honour to make it, make sense of all of the heartache that I had. So I decided that was important to have the foundation and work with women that were suffering from domestic violence, but also, their children were being abused, and not only that, they were being taken away from them. And even today, as I speak, there are kids being taken away from women that are fleeing domestic violence. And it is such a wrong practice, because these women are beautiful mums, but because they've got nowhere to go, they're victimised again and again and again. They leave a domestic violence situation, they're homeless because they go into a shelter for maybe 10 days, and they've got to negotiate day after day after day to stay. And then eventually they can't stay any longer because there's so many waiting to get into that crisis situation. And so they're back on the street again, and then their kids are taken. Sometimes they're taken in the interim between when they flee and when they finally get into crisis centre, because there is such a huge waiting list of, like, I remember getting a lady in there recently, and the police officer that I spoke to, he said, look, we have, up to 1,000 people a week that we've got to find somewhere for them to live, women and kids that are being abused. And he said, so, get on the end of the line. Basically, that was what he said to me, and I said, this young girl is so vulnerable. They'd already removed her kids because she was homeless, and I said, you know, I just cannot see her in the street any longer. She's such a vulnerable young woman, and anyway, they took her in that night, and I'm so proud to say that in 2 weeks' time, she'll be moving into our safe house, where she'll be safe for the next 12 months. So we've secured a safe house. We've also secured I've called it our community care cottage, because it's a little old cottage that is a heritage place in Mount Barker where I live, and I've set it up, and I'm still in the process, except that's where I had a fall. I fell down the step in the cottage trying to move furniture and stuff away, and we're just setting it up as a little cafe where people can come and have a coffee, have a meal. The 2 front rooms will be our pre-loved treasure box, we're calling it, so that any excess stuff that we've got we'll sell to people for a couple of dollars, so that we can keep running the centre. And I've set up a group that I call my creative group. We call it SEW, S-E-W, Much Hope. And I have the group at the moment at the Littlehampton Hall, and that the girls just really love it. But it's now progressed into something new, which I'll tell you about in a minute. But the community care cottage is going to also provide showers for people who are homeless, and mums and their kids to come and watch TV. They can spend a day there if they need to. They can have a shower and they can wash their clothes. And we've got a clothesline and washing machine, and the house has got 2 bathrooms. So it's just going to be. I'm just so excited about it, because it's something that the vision that I've had is to have a gated community, but that is so expensive, and we rely totally on donations. We don't have any constant income. It's just what people donate to us, and we just, like last week, I had to move some furniture to pick it up from a place in Adelaide to take up there to put into the house, and I hired a small truck, and one of my volunteers was going to drive it, and he came up and got in the truck and just got almost just out of the gates of where we hired the truck, and the truck broke down. And so we tried everywhere else to hire a truck, and we couldn't get one. So I ended up having to get a removalist to pick up the stuff, because it was a whole house full of furniture from a lady who'd gone into a nursing home. And it cost us just under $500 for the removalist to shift it. So it's, those sorts of things that really make it more difficult. So our bank balance went from, about $600 down to $100, and so, then we've got to wait till we build it up again to do some more. So it's sort of like this, a balancing act really with what we do. But, people are so beautiful and so generous, and my heart gets blessed every day with the things that people do to support us. And, some nights I go home and I think, my God, yesterday I had absolutely nothing and I couldn't do anything, and today look what's happened. And so I now try not to worry about, tomorrow. I think, okay, this is good, and what I'm doing, I know, makes a difference in the lives of people every single day. And so it just happens, and I just feel really blessed. And so the safe house is something that's we've got to pay the rent on it. They're both rental properties, so we've got to pay the rent. But I've been very, very lucky that an elderly gentleman in interstate, somebody gave him my book, and he read it, and contacted me, and he's actually paid the rent on both places for the next 12 months for us. So, yeah, so that's the only reason that we've got it. And, yeah, so that's what I mean. It's just, I feel so blessed that, you know, these things happen just out of the blue, which support the work that I'm doing. So to go back to the girls that are doing, I'm teaching sewing, and I've got a couple of volunteers that help, and, you know, my volunteers are just amazing. And the girls have been learning to make, like, things for their children, you know, little bags for themselves and all sorts of things. And I was approached by a male nurse who works in the Modbury Hospital and also in the Campbelltown nursing home. And that came about quite by accident because he had some furniture to give me, and in making that contact, he was talking to me about these oldies that are in these places and also in outreach in their own homes whose families abuse them. But not only that, they prevent in the nursing homes or in the hospital, some of them are palliative care, some are dementia patients, and the hospital ask for things like underwear, pyjamas, because they're worn out, and because they wash them in the hospitals, they don't take the care that you would yourself, and so they all go in together and they wear out much quicker. But the families have control of these older people's money, and they won't provide the funds to get them new underwear or things like that. Tracky pants, which some of them, when they're in dementia and they're in those chairs because they can't walk any further, they need warm things on their legs. And so the girls that I'm helping to learn to sew are now making track pants and tops and all sorts of little things for these people. So we've set up now a form that the hospital is going to have, and we hope to have this, to roll this out in every nursing home. It's going to be a huge thing, but every nursing home in South Australia we're hoping to do eventually, so that we can give packs to these people who otherwise are wearing, no knickers or, threadbare clothes. So the pack consists of 6 pairs of knickers or underpants, and this is from both male and female, 4 singlets, 5 pairs of track pants, 3 wind cheaters or tops, a jacket and a cardigan or jumper, and some pyjamas and some shampoo and some little pamper pack that will just be something special for them. And so each person, that the hospitals will know who these people are, and they fill out the forms for them, and then we provide the pack. So I'm in the process at the moment of approaching the bonds and people who make underwear, because I want them to have new underwear, of course. And so we're making the tracky pants and things out of fabric that's donated, and some that I've got left over from what I used to do. And so the girls are so happy. And my secretary on my committee, she worked at TAFE for a number of years and is now retired. And she worked with refugees, teaching them English as a second language. And so she's now got a group of 11 of them that want to learn to sew. And so the other day, but that's at Ingle Farm, so I'm trying to get some time to spend time with them, but it's not every week. I can't physically do it. But we got some photos of them cutting out the track pants and sewing the track pants, and it's amazing. And so they're so excited to be able to help somebody because they're being helped, and my mums and that are doing the same. So it's just like a circle of beautiful things that are happening, and I feel like sometimes I need to pinch myself to believe that it's really happening, that my dream is coming to fruition, and so I'll just keep going. Any questions?
Very, oh, I don't know, it's just beautiful, beautiful stories. Thank you for sharing them.
My pleasure. Just one other thing. Yesterday I had a lass come, she rang me and she got to know about what we were doing through somebody, and it seems to be happening all the time now. And she's a horticulturist and landscape gardener, and I also work with Share the Dignity, and they provide, you know, beautiful things for us. And I was asked to speak at their high tea at the Stanford Grand, and Bunnings had donated some beautiful hot pink pot plants to decorate the tables. And at the end of the day, the lass who was the MC announced that they were donating all of these pots, and then they announced that they were giving them to us for our community care centre, and so I've got these plants. So this lady yesterday is going to landscape the front garden for us, and we're going to plant veggies out the back, it's a lovely area where it is, and I'd love you all to come and have a look. And out the back, we've got this huge big room that we're going to have, sort of make into like a cafe. We've had a barista coffee machine donated to us as well, and so that's going to be installed in a week or two. And so the veggies out in the garden will be like for community, for the coffee shop, and to have like to make lunches for the women, well, for anybody, and then whatever people would like to have, as you know, to take the women and people who need food, the food will be there. So, you know, and I've got a number of people in my Zonta group and my Soroptimus group that have offered to cook meals so that we can have ongoing meals in the freezer, and I've been donated a freezer and a fridge, and so it's just, yeah, it's just amazing.
Perhaps if you could leave your details,
Sure.
Pam, about all of these little things that you've got going at the moment, and I'm sure that through either FADVAN or Healing Through Love or any of the other organisations that we're involved with, perhaps we could help you along a little bit.
That would be lovely. That would be lovely. Thank you. Thank you.